While the New Zealand horses didn't make much of a noise in Australia yesterday, the Kiwi accent was certainly on show, thankfully, at a lot of the post-match, mainly through the deeds of J-Mac. James McDonald hit the right horses in the right vein of form at the right time. You'd think, although his ride on the raging hot favourite in the Caulfield Guineas was one that he said wasn't up to much, but luckily, fellas, he was probably riding far lap. Well, no, not far lap, but I suppose in this race, Hayden, the first thing that went wrong, if you could say it could go wrong, is that the Autumn Sun, we're used to him being right at the back of the field, he jumped probably first or second.
Yeah, by putting him in a position to be so far forward in the race than where he'd normally be is a huge advantage, because that's length he doesn't have to make up later on.
Yeah, looks like he's settling into a nice position there, but now he's three wide. What do you do?
He was about to go and finish in a lovely spot, fifth one off the rail, but Noel Callow on a horse called the August, it was I think an 80 to 1 chance, saw J-Mac on the odds-on favourite outside him. He said, "No, son, you go and just stay out there," and posted him three wide the trip. But really, Hayden, when you're riding a horse of this quality, and he's been spruiked for quite a while now, I think the ease of the win probably staggered James more than anything else, because he even admitted it after the race. It wasn't a pretty ride, was it?
It wasn't a pretty ride, but what else could he have done? He doesn't have a lot of options anyway, so you've got to do now the best of what option you've got. And when you know you're on a good horse like that, just don't panic.
So he's concentrating on rhythm now, isn't he? Just getting the horse comfortable. Chris Waller sort of dwelled on that after the race, said there were a few expletives flying around early in the race, but all good jockeys just find a nice rhythm for their horse, and that's the best they can do. Is that a fair play, or is that a polite play?
No, that's what any jockey wants to do, is just get their horse in a nice flowing rhythm, keep the horse happy. You're saving your energy for the final sprint, and that's what he's done.
And is it sort of part of the jockey's ideal to stand up in the saddle like that for the last 50 yards? Is that?
In a big race like that, it just becomes natural to most, I think, but ideally, no, it's not.
Okay. Vacillator went a good race for second, but a few of the tipsters earlier in the day and probably earlier in the week were almost saying that Autumn Sun was so much better than this group of horses that he would just bolt in, and obviously he has. But that sort of surprised me, because, you know, he's been winning well. I guess the question is, how good was the opposition? Vacillator, who the Valachi Downs people will be fairly happy with in terms of Zakinto, ran last at its last start and held on for second there. Were they just mugs, the ones, but yeah, politely mugs?
You can only but win, and he had a tough trip, but he just put them away pretty stylishly. I thought after the race, though, the telling comments from James and from Chris Waller as well were, the horse has got a huge reputation.
Shall we hear what J-Mac had to say immediately after the race, winning with the Autumn Sun?
J-Mac, all the emotions are pouring out. You've had a frustrating day to date, but wow, what a ride.
Oh, I don't know about that. It turned pear-shaped all the way around. Chris, he said just keep him in a rhythm and he'll do the rest. He's by far the best horse, and he's a superstar, this horse, and world's his oysters. Not many can do that, but he relaxes well. He's got all the right attributes to be one of the best horses coming in Australia.
I suppose when I say wow of a ride, you stay cool, calm and collected on a horse like that. When you're stuck three deep, you're still patient, you go through the gears and you hit the line the way you did.
I'm taking no credit for that. It ended up pear-shaped, but I'm lucky enough I was on a superstar and he got the job done. But one thing about him, he just relaxes no matter where you are. I jumped too well for him today, and he wanted to get on with the job, and I didn't want to take up the lead, so I elected just to sit there, and he just breathed beautifully and got an explosive tenderfoot.
How good is he really? Could he take on Winx in a Cox Plate?
I wouldn't. She's too good, but he is in his own right. Look at him. He's just a champion. He's a very good horse.
So that was the question immediately afterwards with all the media. Cox Plate, the Autumn Sun versus Winx, and I suppose realistically enough, George, Chris Waller was wanting to throw some, water on that. He's sort of he's spoiled for riches, really, isn't he?
Exactly. I mean, ultimately it's the owner's decision whether or not they want to take on Winx in the Cox Plate. I think it'd be a fascinating race.
If you were the owner? If you just bought in like John Massara had in the last few...
Yeah, they've spent, I don't know how much they spent, but I think they spent more than a round of drinks to buy 50% of this horse. Obviously, looking forward. But
He's just made himself as a sire.
Yeah, that is a sire-making race, isn't it, the Caulfield Guineas? I want to ask you, though, Hayden, when you're riding a dominant favourite like that in a Group 1 race and you find yourself in that situation where it's just gone pear-shaped, as J-Mac said, what do? Do you panic? Do you change your normal thing? Or is it so important, as we keep hearing these days, it's all about that rhythm, get them in that natural rhythm?
Yep, get them in that rhythm and make the best of a bad situation. Panic? No, don't do that at all. Every stride a horse takes, you've got another decision to make. Just make the best decision you can from then onwards.
So he doesn't really need to go to the Cox Plate, does he?
Look, I think both James, his opinion was no, she's too good. Obviously talking about Winks. Yeah. And I think Chris Waller said that as well too. So, but hey, why not? If imagine what it would be worth if he happened to win the Cox Plate and beating Winks.
Got good records in 2-3-year-olds.
Yeah, they have with the pulling the weight for age.
Yeah. What about the way he goes, Moonee Valley? He's a big striding horse.
Don't think so. It'll matter.
No.
He handled that yesterday.
Yeah. Caulfield's a bit of a tricky track too, isn't it? Anyway, so J-Mac on and very excited about the Autumn Sun. And then, in what was probably on paper anyway, a low-key lucky last, even though it was the Herbert Power Stakes, he managed to get on top of a horse that hadn't really stepped out over much distance, apparently, but certainly showed its quality and ended up being talked about like some sort of past-the-post Melbourne Cup winner. This is, how do you say this, George?
Yucatan. This is an unbelievable performance in the Lloyd Williams colours, now starting to circle the field in the white cap. He was back, couldn't get in. James admitted after the race it was a terrible ride as well, and but have a look what this horse does to the opposition.
Is this a terrible ride, though?
Well, he moved forward. He was called wide, but he's still 3 wide. He's gone from being 4 and 5 wide to 3 wide on speed.
Again, just finding rhythm, Hayden, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. A lot of people think 3 wide is always a bad ride. Yeah. But sometimes you're better off being there on a horse. And like a big striding horse like him, he probably needs to be in the open and needs to be in this rhythm and rolling. And it's probably a good place for him to be.
A staggering point is about to come up very shortly. Have a look when James says, OK, we'll see how good you are.
Just keep going forward.
Yeah, I'll just roll forward under your natural rhythm, but have a look at this.
Now, Rising Red was the favourite for this race, pretty much. That's the horse in third, starting to fall back through the field, so not its best day, obviously. Odeon's coming wide, it's the showy one. But this horse has just second-rated them, and as I was trying to say earlier, I don't think I spat it out, it hadn't had a run over a decent distance before today, and post-match they're talking about it as, well, what's his name, Nick Williams?
Yeah.
It's a Melbourne Cup winner in waiting, quote, unquote.
I think the winning margin was only a length and a half, but from about 75 metres onwards,
and what about pulling up like that? How does that
J-Mac was posing for the photo.
Why would you do that? Seriously. I mean, I'm only a layman.
Like George says, to pose for the photo. Exactly. Why would you do it? The whole way down the straight, he's watching the inside field, so James knew exactly what he had and what he had up his sleeve and covered, but yeah, that's very risky doing that. Yeah.
You just keep it running to the line. I mean, I don't want to be...
Is he thinking, and I'm just trying to play the devil's advocate here, but is James thinking, he's had a bit of a hard run, he asked him to do a lot during the race and then kicked clear on the home turn, so he's got the situation, you could see him looking at the infield screen.
Well, the way I'm looking at it is the horses behind have got to run up him, or run over him. He pulled up that quick.
Yeah,
exactly. That's danger money for mine.
Yeah. But as you said, having a hard run, it's run 2,300 or 2,400 metres anyway. By pulling him up the last 50, it's still a 2,350 metre race. It's still a hard run.
Yeah.
Is it too early to say that this feels like a bit of a raid and pillage, boys, from the Northern Hemisphere down under? When we said we've got another race coming up shortly that's going to maybe quantify it even more. Let's go to that, shall we? The Caulfield Stakes. I had it down as $1 million warm-up for Caulfield Cup and Cox Plate runners, but for me anyway, it was just a real eye-opener. Those 2 Godolphin horses, Humidor third, but the Godolphin horses were just clearly superior as we picked them up at about the 800 when they start to sprint. We're talking about Ben Battle and the horse that won it, and what was the one that ran second again?
Blair House.
Blair House. Both they've gone out at races and reversed the finishing positions on a regular basis, I think, up in the Northern Hemisphere. But is this frightening? How much superior they were to horses like Unforgotten, which has got a boom on it. Humidor, obviously, he went a good race. D'Argento, they were just, they basically finished as far in front of them as Winks would have.
Yeah, they dominated this race over the final stages. Ben Battle and Blair House. Blair House had beaten Ben Battle in Europe and in Dubai, I think, during the year. The horses chasing them, though, have a look at the third horse, Humidor. It pushed Winks pretty closely in the Cox Plate last year, and it was never going to get any closer than what it did yesterday to these two horses. These are seriously, seriously talented horses.
So Unforgotten and Night's Watch sort of tamed there. Humidor at 15, Winks $1.25. Ben Battle versus Winks. Now, I suppose the way that they prep horses in the Northern Hemisphere, is there a question mark that, even though it's a great trainer, Ben Battle might not back up quite as well as perhaps a Southern Hemisphere horse? Thoughts?
May not. Did I hear correctly that they come down a bit earlier this year, though?
Yeah, they're really keen, I think, to take this on.
So by being here a little earlier, they might be more acclimatised and ready to back up even.
Highest rated horse to ever come to Australasia.
They're getting really serious, aren't they, Godolphin? They've got so many horses at their disposal. The Cliffs of Moher, that was an enormous race.
I was just going to say, plus, you know, the Cliffs of Moher.
Cat was tailed off a long way out in Stormtown Lake, but hey, look, she's $1.25. She's $1.25 for a reason. She's the best we've seen.
Maybe Savvy Cope won't run second. We were talking about that last week. Oh, she could run second, but you look
well,
at
how
those
do we
horses.
weigh up Savvy Cope after we've seen those two horses from Godolphin yesterday, and we obviously know all about Winks? You know, how do we rate? Is it worth their while taking Savvy Cope?
Well, it's worth their while, but you're probably thinking it's going to be a great day there. Let's just enjoy the atmosphere rather than say we're going to serve it up to Winks and a couple of
It's a
Godolphins.
horse race, anything can happen.
She's eligible to be there, so why not?
Yeah.
I mean, it was great to see her there, and it'd be great to even see her finish in the finish.
They went tick over 2 minutes for that race, so it's not like they were mucking around. It wasn't a hand canter and then sprint home or anything like that. In terms of the Unforgottens and that, there was a question mark over whether they'd go Caulfield Cup Cox Plate with her. She was okay, but didn't take that next step perhaps when the pressure really went on, or was it a sort of Victorian
You can't see
thing?
her turning around that form from yesterday because she was so far off those two Godolphin horses. And in fact, anything that finished behind those two Godolphin horses yesterday, they'd be hard pressed turning it around in a couple of weeks' time.
Apart from the run that ran fourth.
Yeah, what was that?
The Cliffs of
the Cliffs of Moher, yeah, that was here, but...
Okay, that was Melbourne. Meanwhile, in murky old Sydney, it was a sellout for the race, which achieved top billing, I suppose, if you criteria your marketing as any publicity is good publicity during the week, because there was plenty of it, of course, with the Sydney Opera House and the protesters and what have you. But I actually thought that it lived up to its billing. We're talking about the fastest horses on the planet, arguably, lining up for $13 million, no less, in the Everest. As they jumped, the red colours on the inside, Red Zal jumped straight to the front, and I suppose in many ways, apart from finding his most popular position, he's possibly handled the murky track conditions or the wet track conditions better than some of his rivals who got a lot of backwash during the run.
The race was over for mine 50 metres after the start when Red Zal jumped, found the lead, and it became pretty obvious that nothing was keen to go up and take it on.
Yeah.
And when you get a jockey like Kieran McEvoy able to dictate the first half of the world's richest turf race, it's all over. It is all over, and so it proved. And he loved the cut and the track as well. And he's there've been two Everests. He's won them both now, Red Zal.
The other interesting fact in terms of rides, Hayden out wide, Tommy Berry, Osborne Bills.
Yeah, very interesting ride for an Australian rider to be heading out there, but from what I recall, he was under instructions to do that from the connections, and it's paid off, I think, at the end of the day. They were all emotionally ecstatic after the race and thought they'd won.
You're in a $13 million race and the trainer says, run to the outside fence. What do you think?
Again, instructions, you've got to attempt it. He's run third, come from last, huge run, and like I said, as far as I know, the connections are ecstatic with the run.
So the race was all about the winner, really, wasn't it?
Trapeze Artist was good in second,
yep.
Chased hard and when it's usual honest race, but the third horse, Osborne Bulls, I thought was a more interesting ride. It was tactics that they'd obviously talked about prior to the race, the connections and the trainer and the jock. And for Tommy Berry to carry that out, it took a lot of mental fortitude, I suppose.
Let's go away from the race a wee bit. Let's talk about the concept. Would it work in New Zealand? It's sort of the DNA of racing, isn't it? It's like, I've got the fastest horse, let's put the money up and let's all run. I mean, I know it's not as simple as that, but it's basically put the money up, we'll all throw it in the pot and race for it. And I thought it lived up to the hype, certainly before the race, watching it all afternoon. And the crowd obviously turned up, 35, 40,000 shut out or sell out.
7,000 more than last year.
Yeah. So is it just a peeing contest between Victoria and New South Wales, George?
There's a lot of, it's obvious that there is a lot of distinction in the ranks between New South Wales racing and Victoria racing. It is wonderful to be part of that scene if you've got horses in New South Wales and in Victoria, because the two racing jurisdictions are arguing with each other and throwing money at it. It's a wonderful time to be part of that scene. And it's obvious when you consider that you've got a race like the Everest in Sydney on the same day as 4 Group 1 races down in Caulfield in Melbourne. You know, there's no love lost. They want to be the best. So they're throwing money at it, which is great to be, if you're lucky enough to be part of it.
Is it taking the shine off Victoria though, really, or is it just adding to the whole spring racing feel, you think, Hayden?
Oh, I think just adding shine to the spring racing. As you said, the money that's getting thrown at it is becoming unbelievable now, and as George said, I'd love to be part of it.
The interesting thing for mine yesterday was you had Chris Waller, Sydney's dominant premier trainer for several seasons, and you had James McDonald, currently Sydney's leading metropolitan rider, both down at Caulfield yesterday, and the Everest was in Sydney. So
there's your answer really though, isn't it? I mean, the Sydney was all about one race, and they had a big crowd that went to it, and they talked about it all week, and they threw the numbers up on the...
They had another $1.3 million race in Sydney yesterday. I can't pronounce its name, but...
Yeah, it's sort of the country version of it. Actually, that was a great concept too. That was the, what do they call it? It's named after the Kosciuszko, named after the highest mountain in Australia, or hill in Australia, I suppose, where I think they raised the prize money and got the players involved in the ownership of the horses through a raffle system, which is a great idea. You know, you buy your raffle ticket and you've got a crack at $1.3 million and it's the country horses. Is this... In terms of high stakes races, is this where the future of racing is going when you want to get those telephone number stakes? That's, you know, outside of the race perhaps that it's based on. The Everest is the richest turf race in the world.
I just think it's, as I said before, it's if you're a participant with horses there in those areas, it would be very good if, obviously, and it's a great time to be involved. You got to remember too, it was only 10 or 12 years ago, New South Wales racing wasn't going much better than what we are now.
Right.
So they've turned it around to that, and that's how quickly it can be done.
Is the Melbourne Cup being such an international race now part of this equation, that this is, you know, Australia as sprinters, we make the world's best, let's have a race that's worth mega bucks for the horses that we produce? Is that part of the attraction? Even though they got the bonus of US Navy flag turning up yesterday, and ironically he couldn't handle the wet conditions down under, but... Is that part of the equation, the fact that the Melbourne Cup's just starting to... New South Wales trying to benefit from the fact that it's not...
You would think that it's been dominated and organised by the breeders, because John Massara was involved with it, obviously, the concept of the Everest. But I think it's a great concept, and I congratulate the Aussies for the way they do it. All the controversy during the week about the advertising on the Sydney Opera House and all that, that's wonderful. That is great. They had 300,000 people protested, signed a signature, but it's all dominating the headlines. Good on them.
I don't think it was so much about it being on the Sydney Opera House, it was more about how it got there, with Alan Jones sort of bludgeoning the government to putting it up there. Did you read any of that, follow any of that? What do you think of that?
No, not a lot really, but I'm a little disappointed in the controversy behind it. You know, the gambling advertising on such a prestige building. You know, I don't like it. Well,
if you want to go fascinating facts on the Sydney Opera House, I think the original budget was about $7 million. They couldn't raise that way back in the day when they decided to build it. It cost $102 million, and it was funded by New South Wales Lotteries. So it was funded by, basically the sort of money that it was advertising during the week. So that was a wee bit ironic, I thought. Do you want any more fascinating facts about Sydney Opera House?
No, not the Sydney Opera House. I've been there a couple of times, haven't performed yet, but the other thing I liked about it was the build-up to the Everest. Gee, they really got behind it. The crowd, 40,000 people in the pouring rain, and they really made a big go out of it too, and they've got the crowd royal thing going there.
Yeah.
Took a leaf out of Tony Lee's book.
And George. Tony and George. Right, that's Australian racing almost. We'll go to the break where we'll talk, after which we'll talk about riders, since we've got a great ex-jockey with us, and riding in New Zealand generally. But let's have a look at a couple of the other feature races in Australia yesterday, starting with the 1,000 guineas. And Amphitrite. I've been practicing that on the plane all the way up and blew it completely. Absolutely smashed them. That's what it should be called.
3 starts ago, won a maiden at Sale.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, wins 1,000 guineas.
As we mentioned earlier, peaceful out the back there, but she had a seasonal complaint yesterday. That's the post-match on that. And the other feature race, this is another stallion-making race. It's the 2-rack handicap. And Land of Plenty landed plenty of big bets and secured his stud career with victory.
Siege of Quebec, and Land of Plenty's going to race clear. Land of Plenty won the 2-rack by a length. Hartnell, third Siege of Quebec, fourth Shillelagh from Waging War Noir.